Are folks counting out the 2025 Cardinals too early? That was one of the big themes from Winter Warm-Up Weekend. We'll recap the event and give our take on where the Cardinals stand. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of b-schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025, coming off the Winter Warm-Up Weekend down at Busch Stadium and Ballpark Village. Has everybody fired up about Cardinals baseball, right? Right? I don't know if all the Cardinals fans are fired up, but you know what? There was still some pretty good attendance, I thought, down there from the fan base and autograph lines and the Q&As and a weekend of baseball down at Busch despite the temperatures being sub-freezing, and in some cases it felt sub-zero. I don't know that it was quite as cold as last year's winter warm-up, but it was still, pretty frigid down there to be sure. But we've got Cardinals baseball to talk about now and plenty of topics to get into over the days and weeks ahead. Now that we've spoken to, about half of the team, it seems like, a number of guys coming through the car wash there in the interview room, whether that was right before or right after signing their autograph sessions, etc. We talked with coaches. We talked with Ollie Marmol. We talked with John Mozeliak. Talked with the owners, Bill DeWitt Jr. and his son, team president Bill DeWitt III. So what that means is we'll have topics to hone in on from the winter warm-up weekend as we go forward here on b-schaeff Daily. So, number one, if you'd like to subscribe to the YouTube channel, now's a great time to do it as we finally have some things to talk about. Whether or not they trade Nolan Arenado, now we know that we can say, oh, well, Alec Burleson said this. Let's talk about Burley and how we look forward to his season. If there's anybody in particular that you want me to do an episode and really focus in on a player or a concept for this Cardinals team in 2025, let me know in the comments below, because I've got the ammunition now to be able to do it and to tell you, well, here's what Burleson had to say, and here's why he's really looking more forward to maybe getting an opportunity to play first base more so than the outfield, and whether or not we actually think that's realistic based on the Cardinals' plans. Like, there's finally stuff to talk about. That's just one such example. So let me know in the comments below if you have ideas for the direction we should take the show leading up to spring training. And spring training is just around the corner. My plan is to get down there just a day or two after the Super Bowl, which is the 9th of February, if I'm not mistaken. But one major topic I will be talking about on the show is actively searching for business partnerships to help facilitate spring training and make it happen. So if you have any interest in partnering with b-schaeff Daily for the spring training coverage, and that can mean the podcast, that can also mean the YouTube videos where we did the sights and sounds of spring training last year. Those videos ended up getting a ton of views because Cardinals fans were so interested in what goes on behind the scenes down at spring training for those who aren't able to make it down. That was a very popular series. So we'll continue to do things like that, where your business logo can be plastered onto that video if that's something that you are interested in doing. So if you have a business or you know somebody who does, send them my way. You can DM me at bschaeffer12 on Twitter, or you can email me bschaeffer12@outlook.com. Lots of ways that you can reach me, so just hit me up. You can comment below, and I'll be able to point you in the right direction. But I'd like to take a moment to tell you about our partners, Revival LLC and Smith Agri-Service. Revival LLC specializes in passionately restoring log cabins to their former glory by studying traditional woodworking practices of the past and utilizing them in our modern world to create genuine, timeless beauty. Their focus is preserving these cherished values in existing structures, whether it be your log cabin or a historic home, and elevating them to a higher standard. So if you value craftsmanship, and I know you do, give Craft Revival LLC a call today. The number is 573-366-6563. They specialize in log cabin repairs, maintenance, porch remodeling, historic millwork, and now they offer new timber-framed construction. Keeping craftsmanship alive one project at a time since 2021, Craft Revival LLC. And Smith Agri-Service is a family-owned independent retailer providing farmers in Missouri, Illinois, and Iowa, all across the Midwest, folks, with competitive pricing on Corteva, BASF, generic brand crop protection products, and Brevant corn and soybean seed. If you're a farmer in these areas, you need to scan that QR code on the graphic on YouTube or text 202-988-1106 or email smithag@irtc.net for more information. So here's the theme of the day. What we heard from winter warm-up from a lot of different folks involved with the Cardinals, and it shouldn't surprise us that this was their takeaway, is, hey, don't count us out so quickly. Brendan Donovan was a guy that I was surprised a little bit by the bravado that he showed and the boldness in him saying, I think this is going to be a team that can shock some people. Ollie Marmol, maybe not as surprised to hear from him that he says, we think this group that we have is up to the challenge. We're going to surprise some people this year. Sonny Gray, one of the players who had every opportunity to look elsewhere, could have told John Mozeliak in the Cardinals front office, I want to trade, I want out. He said, I'm not really sold on this notion that we can't win with these guys that we have. Wilson Contreras was even more determined in the way that he described the current standing of the Cardinals. And, I mean, I would say that probably the most motivational, the most inspirational, if you're a Cardinal fan looking for some hope to cling to, Wilson Contreras was where you found that over the weekend. And I did post a number of full interviews. Wilson's was one of them, about 12 minutes or so of Contreras, talking about the fact that he had the same opportunity as Sonny Gray and as really Nolan Arenado, where the front office comes to him and says, hey, this is where we're at, looking to trim payroll, looking to maybe not do what Contreras was hoping to see the team do when he called out the front office at the end of the season and said, we've got some pieces here that we obviously need to add to be able to get where we want to go. He put it out on the line, and then it comes out, all right, the Cardinals are not doing that. They're going in the opposite direction. So instantly you go, well, what does that mean for Wilson Contreras? Like, he just called out the front office. He probably isn't going to be too satisfied by the idea that not only are the Cardinals not significantly increasing payroll, filling the roster needs through free agency, they're actually going to go backward. They're going to cut payroll this coming season. After Wilson Contreras, following the final home game of the year, I think it was, made those comments about the front office needing to get them the pieces that they need. How's Contreras going to respond to that? Well, he still wanted to be a Cardinal. Apparently, he had told Lars Nootbaar during that end of the season run, some point in September, that he wasn't going anywhere, even though the writing was maybe on the wall for the Cardinals to turn this around in a different direction. Within that clubhouse, the whispers had begun, if you will, of what could be coming, and obviously you turn your attention to the guys who are making a lot of money at that point and say, well, they're the ones that could be on the chopping block, and they've got the agency to say they do want to go, or they do want to stay because of the no-trade clauses that all three players possess, talking about Arenado, Sonny Gray, and Wilson Contreras. But Wilson Contreras basically said, it would have been too easy for me to request a trade, asked to go somewhere else, and he didn't want to leave the Cardinals behind and his teammates behind. I'm going to play a little bit of the Wilson Contreras audio for you here in this video. You're going to be able to go elsewhere on the channel and find that full video if you are interested. But since we're talking about it, and we're going around this premise of, could this Cardinals team be better than people think? And why is it that we have sort of decided that they're not going to be competitive and they're not going to be very good? Because we know the payroll is sort of the aspect of this that gets the most headlines, but is there reason to believe the Cardinals are going to fall off the map this year, even though they're leaning more on less proven internal options? Sort of bandying that question around and seeing what we think about it today. But let me let you hear from Wilson Contreras a little bit from over the weekend as to his decision to why he wanted to stay with the Cardinals in the first place. I think it is worth your time and your listening here from Cardinals now first baseman Wilson Contreras.
I was like throughout last season, I was hearing the direction of the team, of where they wanted to go, and I said I was going to be a part of this. The first thing that I said to them when I signed here is that by the time that I leave the team, I want to see the team better than what I found, and that was my main reason. The second reason was because it was going to be easier for me to request a trade and let everything behind, but because I love these guys, I love the team, I love my teammates, I need to stick with them. And that was one thing that I told Nootbaar at the end last year. I'm not going nowhere because it's too easy for me to ask for to request a trade and be a coward and let everything behind. But I like the challenges, and I love the team. I love the guys.
So how did the conversations go to move you to first base? I mean, what do you like about playing it so far? I know Ollie said that he'd been working with Stubby and Jose Oquendo out in Florida.
Well, it's a little different over there, but I knew the opportunity was going to come this year, reading what what the move was going to be. I told Pedro, don't be surprised, you're going to play first base next year. And he laughed at me. He was like, he acted like, well, it's crazy, but it happened.
So that's third-year Cardinal and first-year Cardinal first baseman Wilson Contreras answering some questions about how it came together that he stayed in the first place, and basically said that he knew kind of that this could be coming, even though he wanted to speak his mind. That's what you love about Wilson Contreras, is he speaks his mind. Spoke his mind and said, I think the front office needs to give us some help. There's some things that we don't have that we need. But he also kind of knew in the back of his mind and had heard potentially what could be coming. And it's funny there, he says, I told Pedro, don't be surprised when I'm playing first base next year. And that was a prescient little quip there from Contreras, because it's exactly what the Cardinals ended up deciding would be the path forward with him. And there were some other things that Wilson said later on, mentioning the idea that, you know, at some point knew I wanted to be here, but I was also sort of wondering that after I called out the front office whether or not they would want me back. And when I got that call, I was happy because this is where I wanted to be. So again, there's some things that probably changed, and maybe at points in time he thought it might not be the case that he would end up back with the Cardinals, but he wanted to be here. And you heard the reason why. He loves the teammates. He doesn't want to take the easy way out. He signed here and said, I want to leave the Cardinals better than when I found them after signing, and then on the day that I leave this team, I want them to be better off than when I got here. That, again, like, I don't think that's just bluster when it comes to Wilson Contreras. I think that's the way the guy operates. There was a part in this response from him during the interviews. I believe you heard it right there in the clip that we played, where he said he didn't want to be a coward and ask for a trade. He equates that to being a cowardly thing because he agreed to be with the Cardinals. I've said it before on this show, but I'll say it again in light of these comments from Wilson. This is the guy that Cardinals fans should be ride or die with. If there's any on this team, it's Wilson Contreras. For all the different things he's been through, and not always fair, right? The way that he kind of has developed a narrative around him. Remember with the Cardinals just completely bungling the situation when he first signed here. They had Yachty for so long, they didn't know what to expect of having another catcher and what that was going to look like. They didn't realize the extent to which Yachty just handled everything in terms of the preparation. And they didn't need a catching coach or a catching coordinator. They had Yachty. He filled the role as well as anybody possibly could, right? And then I'm going to go now. Hey guys, this is going to be my last year. I'm going to let you know in advance. So be ready for what that's going to entail. And then when Wilson shows up on the scene, the Cardinals are just used to Yachty having done everything. And so when things look a little bit different, it was the team, it was the pitching staff, honestly, that has to bear some of the blame for that, just not realizing that these things just didn't happen. You just didn't wake up and have all of these things fall into place. Somebody was doing them. A future Hall of Fame catcher was doing them. And it was Yachty. And there's just no level of insight or preparation that Yachty would have been able to give to Wilson, and I know the two talked, that would have prepared him to just become Yachty and fill those shoes. So from the jump, he had, and again, the Cardinals were woefully underprepared. I think it falls on the organization that they didn't have that preparation. And in fairness to them, again, you could see how one might fall into that trap. But I always reiterated, if the Cardinals always were ready at the drop of a hat to talk about how important Yachty was to them, that would stand to reason then that when he's gone, you would need to behave differently as an organization and prepare to not have him, rather than, yeah, we're really going to miss Yachty, and then kind of doing nothing of substance to make sure that the changeover, the baton pass could be as smooth as possible. It just seemed like they were underprepared in that regard, and Wilson took the fall for a lot of it, and I just don't think it was fair to him. And then he comes back in his last couple of years, offensively, one of the teams, if not the team's best consistent performer when he's out there. Then last year, of course, the injuries happen. The fluke hit by pitch and the fluke hit by bat when he's behind the plate as a catcher. Misses a bunch of time for both of those injuries. And at least one of those things now the Cardinals are saying, hey, we're going to be able to take that out of the equation. If he's not behind the plate, he's not suffering those types of fluke injuries, and we can have our best hitter be in the lineup damn near every day, which is a thing that, again, as we're pointing to, are we counting the Cardinals out too early? That's an aspect of this that I think we should look at and say, hey, more Wilson Contreras in the lineup is better than less Wilson Contreras in the lineup. And you heard Wilson there too, or actually, this is a clip I haven't played yet. So let me line this one up where Wilson is asked about his decision and his willingness to play first base and kind of delves a little bit further into it. You heard some of it there, but I wanted to play this clip and separate it out so we could kind of talk through some of this. And listen to what Wilson Contreras says here as to the value of him being the first baseman this year rather than jumbled into the catcher's mix.
I thought about it. I hesitated a little bit, but then I said no, because if I move to first base, I open the opportunity to create a better roster and have more depth to it. And we need Ivan bats and we need Baez defense. And I think we're going to have a better and complete change of the lineup.
Listen to Wilson Contreras there. We need Ivan's bat and we need Pedro's defense. So, I think Pedro Pages and a lot of Cardinals fans look at his involvement and they're frustrated because they want more time for Ivan Herrera. I am telling y'all now, it's going to work out. It is going to work out that Ivan Herrera is going to get a lot of time in the lineup, which is the benefit of having him in there. I'm not saying he can't turn into a plus defensive catcher. Hopefully this is an offseason where he's putting a lot of the work in to make that happen. But the primary benefit of him being in there is his bat. And between Contreras playing first base and Pedro catching, you're going to have Ivan Herrera DHing, I think, a decent amount of time. Yeah, there will be times where they want to get Jordan Walker off his feet in the outfield, and there will be times when they want to get other guys, into the lineup, depending on who's pitching on the other side, lefty, righty, etc. Luke and Baker's maybe somebody. Alec Burleson, if first base is occupied, then maybe he ends up in the DH spot on a regular basis. But there's going to be opportunity for both Ivan Herrera and Pedro Pages to see plenty of time. And the benefit of Pages being there is when he's in the field behind home plate, I think you get an upgrade from Herrera and potentially even an upgrade from Contreras. I think Contreras put in so much work to make himself a viable defensive catcher and a good one. But I think Pages is better in my estimation. Maybe not with a throwing arm. I think Contreras, I would put Contreras' arm up against anybody, and it is a little bit of a shame that you waste him at first base with that ability to throw the baseball. But that's an aspect of it that I think Pedro Pages is going to be able to handle as well. If the Cardinals, they got to do a better job on the preparation front and the coaching front to get the pitching staff to buy in to how important it is to have a quick delivery to the plate and be able to hold runners and things that they were just simply not doing last year. That's hopefully going to be a huge emphasis in spring training. It's something that I am sure we will talk a lot about when that time rolls around. But I think Pages can handle the job, and I think Ivan Herrera is likely doing a lot of that work in the offseason to improve the throwing arm and be able to be a lot more competitive in that regard too. And if the pitchers do their job, then there will be games where Ivan Herrera will be behind the plate for sure. But I do think Pedro is going to catch more games than Herrera does. That doesn't mean I think Pedro will take more at-bats than Herrera does, though, because Herrera is also going to have DH open to him. He might even have first base open to him as well, just to, days where Wilson can DH, and you can have Ivan play first if it's not Burleson, again, depending on the matchup. So I think all of that's going to work out in terms of the playing time. And yeah, Pedro's going to have to continue progressing as a hitter, I think, to justify that more and more. And look, the more strides that Herrera can make defensively behind the plate, and you don't feel like it's a big drop-off to go from Pedro to Ivan, then I think you're going to see more Ivan behind the plate if that is what comes to fruition. But there's a flexibility to this that I think ultimately benefits the Cardinals. But Wilson knew that if he's playing first base, they're able to jam those guys into the lineup the way that they need to. And you're replacing Paul Goldschmidt one way or another. Could Burleson just do it on a full-time basis? Yeah, maybe. But I think with the pedigree of the bat that Wilson Contreras brings to the table, Burleson could become that type of hitter and prove that he is, but he's not been to this point in his career. And Wilson's obviously a righty, Burley a lefty, so you can get both those guys in at advantageous times for the team and for the benefit of the lineup as a whole. So talking a lot about Contreras here, obviously, but it's just one of the signs that I would point to and say, let's compare this Cardinals team to last year's team and look at why they're supposed to be significantly worse than 83 wins, which is what they had last year. And I think when you dive into the math on this a little bit, it makes sense why the team would be fired up. First of all, because as followers of Mizzou football know, the STP mentality, the something to prove mentality, can be a very valuable thing in sports. People are doubting us. Great. Let me show them why they're wrong. Wilson said, and again, I recommend you check out the full video. I titled it, Wilson Contreras isn't going anywhere. Quote, I love my teammates. I need to stick with them. That's a recent video on the YouTube channel, the Brenden Schaeffer St. Louis Cardinals writer channel, where you're hopefully watching this video if you're not on Spotify. Go listen to that, where he says people doubting us, that's something I hate. People doubting my team, my teammates, me, I hate that. That's something that fuels me. Wilson Contreras is driven by the doubt. And I think, again, let's look at the roster. You're taking the production that Paul Goldschmidt had. Statistically, we're going to stick to the numbers here. Because I think if you wanted to talk about the clubhouse stuff, you could. And we'll get to that maybe at the end. Why that actually, losing some veterans could be the thing that this group of younger players needs to propel themselves forward. That's going to be a big topic of this offseason and going into the spring. And then going into the season of seeing, are these guys going to be able to do it with the group that they have? But Paul Goldschmidt had a 716 OPS last year. That was almost 100 points lower than the previous season, and in that one was 170 points lower than when he was the MVP in 2022. So as much as you are losing Paul Goldschmidt off the payroll, certainly, you're losing his production, you're losing his presence, but you're losing a 716 OPS from 2024 when the Cardinals won 83 games, almost in spite of Goldie's underperformance. Right? He had a 98 OPS plus. It was his first season as a big leaguer where he was below average, below league average as a hitter. What was Wilson Contreras? All right, I'm not saying he's going to play 150 games at first the way that Goldie did. And we did a podcast on this in the offseason where we broke this down, but now that it's even closer to coming to fruition, I think it's important to reiterate. 848 was Wilson's OPS, a 136 OPS plus, 36% above league average. He was 130 some odd points higher than the OPS from Goldschmidt. That's now being put into first base. Yes, obviously you are losing Wilson's OPS as a catcher, but he only got to play in 84 games, only got to have 358 plate appearances. One of the big injuries that he had was getting hit by the bat and his arm breaks because he was behind the plate. The other injury was a hit by pitch. That's your batting. That's unavoidable. If you get hit by a pitch, yeah, you could miss some time. But the Cardinals have taken the potential time that he could miss from various injuries and reduced that by not having him behind the plate. So that's one significant change where you're arguably going to get more of that 848 OPS. If you say, oh, he had a great year, he's not going to do that every year. Okay, he was an 826 OPS his first year with the Cardinals, dealing with all the crap that summer that he had to deal with. Bottom line, Wilson Contreras is a great hitter. And the Cardinals are now going to get that at first base. Is it going to be different? Yeah. Is he going to have to learn a new position? Yeah. Is there going to be a drop-off defensively? Yeah. Goldie's a really good first baseman. It's going to be somewhat akin to when they lost Yachty behind the plate. They don't realize exactly how much they're going to miss it. The infielders, they might understand that it's going to be different. Wilson's going to do the best that he can. Nobody is going to be Paul Goldschmidt in their first year of playing first base. It's just not realistic. So yes, you do have to factor in some of the attrition there to the quality of the first base defense and the infield defense as a result of that. But the guy's a former catcher. Hopefully he's able to pick it up. If not, we'll cross that bridge, and the Cardinals will cross that bridge when they get to it. But let's look behind the plate. All right? Because you are losing that. We need to acknowledge that no longer can you say Wilson Contreras and his 840 OPS is counting as your catcher numbers. But Ivan Herrera had an 800 OPS, and he's going to play more. He's going to get more than those 259 plate appearances that he got last year. If he can replicate an 800 OPS, that is going to be a significant boost, replacing him effectively with what you had from Goldschmidt. And Pages played 68 games, 218 plate appearances. He'll probably get more than he got last year without Contreras into the catching mix. And he only had a 657 OPS. So let's just say he does the same thing. He's a 650 OPS. Contreras over to first base with his great numbers. Ivan Herrera, 800 OPS, is going to play more, as will Pages. Combine the 650 from Pages and the 800 from Ivan Herrera, you probably get basically Paul Goldschmidt's numbers. Is that crazy to say? Right? That's the do-si-do you're doing in the lineup. Not defensively. We know that Contreras will be responsible for a lot of it at first base. But effectively, you're taking the 650 from Pages and the 800 from Herrera, upping the plate appearances enough to where you get about a Paul Goldschmidt type of season. The one that he just had, 716 OPS, where he didn't really contribute in the way that the Cardinals needed him to. So you haven't lost anything. Again, I still think, other than a little bit of a decline defensively, which could honestly be offset to an extent by the upgrade of more Pages behind the plate defensively, you end up probably breaking even. If I'm wrong with that, let me know, but I think the numbers bear it out. And again, we're assuming that similar production moving forward from all parties involved. But again, that's a given no matter what we're talking about when it comes to these types of details. Arenado, right? He's the elephant in the room. I still think there's a chance he gets traded. If not, a 719 OPS, do we think he's going to do that again this next year? I would say no, he'll be better. Could he be worse? Yeah, anything's possible. Could he be traded? Yeah, that's kind of what the Cardinals are looking for. But if they do eventually trade him, you're replacing his 719 OPS. What are you replacing it with? Probably more Nolan Gorman, who had a 671 OPS, but is still just 24, 25 years old. In the prior year, he was an 805 OPS. I would wager that Nolan Gorman is not going to be as bad with a 671 OPS this year as he was this past year. I just think he's going to improve. I'm not saying he has to return to an 805 OPS to improve, but could he get to 719 on the OPS if he's replacing Arenado in the lineup? I think it's plausible. I don't think it's crazy at all that he would do that. Brendan Donovan, he already played a lot. He's going to play more. He had a 759 OPS. That was the lowest OPS that he carried in any of his 3 big league seasons to date. So what if he returns back to the career norm of about 770 on the OPS? Well, that's pretty good. That's going to help the Cardinals line up a little bit. Again, we're talking about the ifs, but while we're doing this, Lars Nootbaar, his OPS was 758. Can he return to 774? That's his career OPS. Even still with the 758, he was a 111 OPS plus. It's 11% above league average. The number you need to circle for Nootbaar is the plate appearances number. He only had 405. He needs 605 this year for the Cardinals to get where they're going, because then they won't be replacing for 200 plate appearances during 50-some-odd games when he's injured that level of productivity, which you might say, oh, he's overrated. I don't care. I'm just looking at the numbers. 758 OPS. I'll take that from all 9 of my players in my lineup because they'll all be 11% above league average. Consistency 1 through 9 is what they need, and if Nootbaar can be out there for 150 games, he's going to give them that. He's not going to suddenly be an unproductive player. You might think he's overrated because he's an international superstar and a big household name and has never been an all-star. Okay, fine. But every year, if you give me his OPS, 739, 788, 784, 758, I'm taking that to the bank and cashing it every single time. They need 600 plate appearances or more out of him. It's just a fact of life. He knows he's got to be more durable to get the Cardinals where they want to go. It's an if, but what if that happens and they finally get a healthy season from Nootbaar? All right? Nothing I've said so far is outlandish. I don't want people to come to me in May and June if certain guys underperform, like Goldie and Arenado did this last year, and say, oh, we should have known the Cardinals' offense. We tried to tell you the offense would be no good. And I said, I just don't believe you. Tell me now, give me your prediction. You really think Gorman's going to be a 580 OPS? He's going to get just substantially worse? Because so far, I've basically said, even if everybody does about the same that they did last year, okay, you're breaking even on a team that won 83 games. Here's the one where you do need to take a little bit of a leap of faith. Jordan Walker can't have a 619 OPS because he's going to be an everyday player. Jordan Walker can be the most significant difference from last year to this year that can upgrade the Cardinals offense because he only had 178 plate appearances, only played a third of a season in the big leagues, and had a 619 OPS. That was 150 some odd points lower than when he had a 787 OPS as a rookie in nearly a full season of 465 plate appearances. His rookie year of 23, he had more plate appearances than the Cardinals just now got from Lars Nootbaar in 24. He played a lot in 23 and compiled 16 home runs and a 787 OPS. I think Walker is going to have a smash type of year. We'll get more of the Walker conversation in a video later this week to talk about why we think that could be the case and how fired up he was at winter warmup because the energy was absolutely palpable. But I'm not penciling Walker in for a 619. If you are, make sure you comment below on YouTube so that we can return to the comments later. Because I don't want anybody to come back and say, oh, I told you he was going to stink. Comment now. What's your prediction for his OPS? Because when it's 730 or 740, and I'm able to point at that and say, look, he's 120 points better than he was last year. Maybe not quite to his rookie season level, but that's a significant upgrade. And when we're predicting the team's record, that's something they didn't have last year. They're getting a benefit from that. Even if Walker is a 700 OPS flat, it's going to be better than what he gave him last year. So that ends up being significant. It's an upgrade. Jordan Walker is going to upgrade the Cardinals from where they were last year to this year. If you disagree, that's within your right. Just make sure that you're specific and let me know below what's his OPS going to be in 2025. but I think it's going to be a heck of a lot better than 619. And then you can look at other guys like Michael Ciani. Michael Ciani will probably be about what he was last year. He had a 570 OPS. It wasn't great, but I think he was better toward the middle to latter end of the season than he was at the beginning. Personally, I would pencil Ciani in for a 600-plus OPS, which I think is about all he needs to do as your 9-hole batter with the great defense he plays. But maybe Victor Scott takes a step forward and steals that job from Ciani, upgrades the offense with another year of growth, and the defense can be comparable because both of them, I think, have gold gloves in their future if they get the playing time. So that's another thing that I look at and say, I think it's going to be better than it was last year. I am drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit, Cardinals fans. That's fine. You can make all the comments and, Mo's got to go. It doesn't matter. Mozeliak is not going to be running this team come October. It's already been announced. You can leave it with the Mo's got to go stuff. It's tired at this point. We know what it is, so let's operate in the reality where the Cardinals are operating. Can we agree? Is that fair? I think it's perfectly fair. Mason Wynn. Can we see a step forward from this guy? Does he become the perennial all-star that we believe he can be? And it starts this year. He had a 730 OPS last year. League average offensively, 102 OPS plus. I think he's got more in the tank. I think he had that first full big league season, tailed off a bit at the end, but saw what it looked like to have the durability to make it through a full season. Said the back is feeling great. They have a plan for how to attack it if it flares up again. Had 15 homers. He wants to hit 20, 25 this year. I think Mason Wynn's going to top that. If you told me over and under on the 730 OPS and the 15 home runs, I would take the over on both. I would take the over on 11 stolen bases as well that he had last year. I think he's going to be a guy that takes another step forward. If you don't think that, that's okay. That could be baked into why you think the Cardinals are going to be bad this year. Just make sure you call your shot. Let me know in the comment below. Predict if you think the Cardinals are going to win 70 games. Tell me, hey, I think they're going to win 70 games, and here's where I differ from Brenden because I think Mason Wynn's going to be worse. I think Jordan Walker's going to be the same. He's not going to get better. I think Gorman's going to be the same. He's not going to get better. Okay. But remember, they won 83 games last year. They didn't win 70. So all of these guys could do the exact same thing. They could improve 0. And I still think the Cardinals are in range to win 80-plus games while looking at the position players. Now, the pitching is a different story. And again, the reason I say this is because even if Goldie and Arenado are gone, that's all you lose from this offense. You have guys aged 21 to 25 to 27 that all could take a step forward. Some of them won't, but some of them may. And even if they don't, and they're just status quo, that's 83 wins from last year. Because again, what you're losing in Goldie and Arenado are two guys that OPS'd 718, 716, 719. You can beat that production with Walker, Gorman. All they got to do is get 700 OPS, and they basically matched last year. If they do better than that, suddenly there's a little bit of helium for this team to win more games than people thought. Okay? So that's why I'm at. Let's talk about the pitching. And this I'll give you, right? Because there are questions about this rotation. For sure, there are questions about this rotation. Let's talk about Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson, because those are the two big names that you lost. You let walk. Lynn had a 3.84 ERA last year. Yeah, you would take that from any spot in the rotation this year. You would love to have that. Should be noted, his ERA versus the number of runs he gave up, a little bit different because he had quite a few unearned runs. But that's okay. We're not going to go out of our way to punish him for that. We're going to give him credit. 3.84 ERA, pretty good. Kyle Gibson, 4.24 ERA, pretty good. I mean, those are solid numbers that the Cardinals, right now, they don't have penciled into their rotation. If the season started today, what's the rotation? All right, what are the knowns? Well, Steven Matz is one of the unknowns, I would argue, so let's save him. Miles Mikolas, 5.35 ERA last year. Is he going to be worse than that? Yeah, he might be. Could he be better than that? You're hoping, but you're basically just kind of, it is a little bit of hopium, right? I'm not trying to be a doubter, but like the trend line for Mikolas has been, troubling. He had an all-star season in 22, went up 4.78 ERA in 23, went up 5.3 ERA last year. Could he be a 6 ERA? Yeah, it's possible. I'll say this, final year of his contract, if he's a 6 ERA, I don't think he's still in your rotation past the first couple of months. I think they would. I think at some point they would cut their losses. If you had a Quinn Matthews that was tearing it up in AAA, they're not going to sit on Mikolas forever. I think they like him as a veteran in the clubhouse, but realistically, I think it's different this year. If the Cardinals are, sitting 500 at the end of May, and you're just getting Mikolas as a 6.5 ERA, let's say, and you've got a guy beating on the door from AAA saying, "I need a spot," They might find him a spot, right? I'm not counting that possibility out. Steven Matz, 5 ERA last year, just hardly pitched. They're going to pencil him in, I think, for a rotation spot to begin the year. But let's not even go with him just yet, because, again, I think he's more on the tenuous side of things. Eric Fetty, 3.3 ERA last year. With the Cardinals, it was 3.72. I think if you penciled him in for a 4.0 ERA, that would be conservative. All right? If you disagree, put that in your reasoning. Again, I want your logic below why they're going to not win as many games as I'm arguing that they have a chance to do. Who does it come from statistically that they lose more games than they win? Because you go, Michaelis, chance for some helium there. If he's a 4.5 ERA, that's a huge upgrade over what he was last year. Granted, you might put in your comment, no, that's not going to happen. And I wouldn't really have a great basis for arguing against you. We'll see. It's an unknown, other than we know he's going to pitch the innings. He's going to take the ball. Veteran, it is what it is. Fetty, 3.7 ERA with the Cardinals last year. You might have felt like he wasn't very effective. Those are the numbers. 3.7 ERA. All right. Get that for a full season. That's probably an improvement over some of the things that you did have. Again, you're losing the 3.8 ERA of Lance Lynn, the 4.2 ERA of Gibson. I'm not convinced Gibson won't be back, but some things would have to happen still. Andre Pallante, he was a 3.78 ERA, and in 20 starts, he was more like a 3.5, maybe even like a 3.3 as a starter. He's back. All right. Michaelis, Pallante, looking at Eric Fetty. All right, that's kind of your top three. Not bad. But remember, can they find somebody to replicate like a 4.2 ERA of a Kyle Gibson if they don't re-sign him? Could Steven Matz do it? Yeah, maybe. But this is where it's easier to kind of poo-poo it and say, I just don't think he's going to be healthy. That's fair. But what about a guy like Michael McGreevy coming in to potentially take an opportunity? He had a 1.96 ERA in the limited sample that he had last year with the Cardinals. Had a 4.02 ERA in Memphis, 27 starts last year. Could Michael McGreevy pull out a 4.2 ERA? Maybe. If you gave him an opportunity to do it, I don't think it's crazy. I don't think it's off the wall necessarily. And yeah, my brain is kind of all over the place now because I haven't talked about Sonny Gray. Sonny Gray's back. He didn't want to be traded. He wanted to be here. He's not convinced that they can't win with this group. He said it needs to be the young guys kind of taking ownership of the clubhouse and the culture as they sort of come into their own, which I think is an easier thing to do when you don't have Arenado and Goldie around, because everybody just sort of, as young players, they kind of deferred to Arenado and Goldie. Newbar talked about this a little bit on Monday at Winter Warm-Up. He said, when things weren't going well, those guys sort of had to be the ones to take the brunt of it. Whether that's just publicly, whether that's in the clubhouse, whether that's whatever, everybody's like, leaders of the team, what do you have to say for yourselves? They're not playing well. The younger guys kind of hid behind that a little bit. Reading between the lines of what Newbar had to say, he said everybody's got to now take ownership. Everybody's got to be willing to take the fall when things aren't going great. Have to have that unity as a team. And excited to be able to do that with a group of younger players. Now that guys like Lars Newbar's been around a few years and Donovan's been around a few years, I think you're going to see that culture. It's not to say it was a bad culture before, but I think you're going to see that culture maybe even take a step forward because young guys will have ownership of it and feel like, hey, it is my place to step up and say something or step up and do something or be something that I just didn't feel compelled to be when I had just, whether it was the perception of these veterans around that they're supposed to kind of handle that, or whether I just didn't feel comfortable because I was too new, I was too green. Whatever that would look like, you've got guys that I think are going to be in a different spot. And Sonny Gray said, loud and proud, they have to take ownership of that, the younger players. And you've got that core of guys like Donovan, Newbar, Alec Burleson. Like, these are going to be guys that are, Nolan Gorman. I mean, these are guys that have been around a few years now and have got to maybe take that next step forward in terms of what that's going to look like. But from a rotation standpoint, 3.8 ERA from Sonny last year, I bet he's better this year. Don't call me crazy. But even if he's not, let's say he's identical. 3.8 ERA, he's your 1. Fetty's your 2. 3.7 ERA. Again, predict in the comments who's going to be worse so I know why they're going to suddenly lose way fewer games. Or pardon me, win way fewer games than 83. If you go Gray, Fetty, Michaelis, yeah, we know it's not great. Pallante, I'll even put Michaelis fourth for you guys, even though I think the Cardinals will actually physically structure him higher than Pallante. The numbers bore out last year that Pallante was the more effective arm. So we'll go Gray, Fetty, Pallante, Michaelis, and then as your number 5, Matz, if he's available. Might give it a shot. Again, complete wild card. I'm not trying to pretend that I'm gonna call my shot on a great Steven Matz season by any means. But McGreevy is kind of there knocking on the door. If he has a great spring and Matz gets hurt, McGreevy's your 5. Is that worse than last year's rotation? Remember, Fetty wasn't in it the whole time. But does he fall into the Gibson spot or the Lynn spot pretty much and replace the production? I say yes. Does Palante fall into the other one and basically replicate the production? I say yes, compared to your opening day rotation. Gray and Michaelis are the other 2. And then you just need basically McGreevy to become the Palante from last year. The one that doesn't really start in the rotation but ends up taking it over and doing a nice job. Okay. Tell me where that doesn't take place. I'm not saying it's guaranteed to do so, but tell me where they fall short of that. And I'll tell you that's probably where they lose more than the 79 games or whatever that they lost last year. Maybe the answer is the bullpen, folks. Maybe the answer is, Helsley's your closer, JoJo is a setup man, but then they're relying on Riley O'Brien to take a step forward. They're relying on, they don't have Kittredge. Like that's, maybe you lose 3, 4, 5 extra games just on not having Kittredge. Maybe that's how you feel. The bullpen, I'll not even try to pretend that I know what's going to happen with the bullpen. It's a huge question mark right now because they haven't added anybody, and they've lost Kittredge, and injuries do pop up. But I think the bullpen is something that they're going to be able to throw some additional arms at later on in the process. What if a guy like Roddery Munoz steps up and he's like, oh, take him out of being a starter. Suddenly he's a pretty good 2-pitch pitcher when he's a reliever, and now you've got something there. He can be a setup man. They need a couple of those things to break right. But if those things happen, like, there's a world in which you can't reasonably expect them to be a whole heck of a lot worse than they were last year. And if this team has a young group of players that takes ownership of what it looks like to run that clubhouse and be responsible for what goes on there and have everybody pulling in the right direction, am I drinking the Kool-Aid, or maybe are we counting the Cardinals out a little bit too soon? I'm not giving you a win prediction. I'm not giving you a win total right now. I'm just asking the question, open-ended. Is it too early to count the Cardinals out in the NL Central? Cubs, I think the Cubs are going to be pretty improved. Brewers, I'm not counting out the Brewers. I've made that mistake pretty much every year, and they continue to exceed expectations. So they'll be in the mix. The Reds, dangerous team again. If they can get that step forward from their young players and get the healthy pitching, they could be very dangerous. I think Hunter Green's going to have a huge year. Pirates, you got Skeens, but I think they're a little bit lean other than Skeens to be able to really make a run this year. But it does still feel like a division that's wide open. Are the Cardinals the favorites? No. Should they be? No. But is there a world in which you kind of squint and say, I understand why the team would say, hey, we're compelling, don't count us out? Or are you absolutely not looking forward to the season because you think it's going to be bad because they decided to trim a bunch of payroll? They haven't changed the team dynamic all that much with the payroll and the money that has been taken off the books. That's the case that I would make after winter warm-up, and hearing these guys talk about how fired up they are for the season, I'm inclined to maybe kind of believe them a little bit. Let me know what you think. Still a long way to go before we can really decide what we're going to think about this Cardinals team coming into the year. But we'll be talking about it here on B-Schaeff Daily. This is the longest podcast we've done in weeks and weeks and weeks because I feel like there's a lot to get into and still a lot that I haven't said. So let your comments inspire tomorrow's episode. Let me know, who do you want to hear about? What do you want to focus on? That's what I'm going to be doing here on B-Schaeff Daily. Thanks again to our partners for this episode, Smith Agri-Service and Revival LLC. If you have a business that you want to get involved with B-Schaeff Daily, especially as we look to try to get to spring training and give you that boots-on-the-ground coverage, let me know. Let me know. DM me at bschaefer12 on Twitter. Email bschaefer12@outlook.com. Be talking about that more and more coming up. All right, that'll do it, though, for this edition of the show. We're going to get out of here under the 45-minute mark. Thank you guys so much for your support of the channel, so much for your channel memberships, so much for your listening, all of that good stuff. We'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.